Hello everyone!
Welcome to the Being Human Cafe. Woohoo! You might be able to guess if you haven't seen our advert of what this week's cafe is all about. Fears and phobias.
Oh yes.
So we're going to crack right on and get into the first question that is one that we're going to answer because it's a very common question that we get asked. What is the difference between a fear and a phobia?
Right.
So what's a phobia?
A phobia is an irrational response to a situation or stimuli. There are three kind of usual responses: fight, flight, or
Freeze.
freeze. They're the ones that are the most common. You do get a bit of that as well. And what it is, it's a completely irrational behaviour. It's subconscious, you're not in control of it.
Not in that moment, no.
Not in that moment, yeah.
No. Whereas a fear is something that there certainly is a response, but that fear can build. You could wind yourself up into being more afraid. A fear is something that starts and it can very quickly elevate, but it has an elevating process to building fear. Whereas phobia, stimulus, response, straight to it, no delay. Yeah, so there's just distinction between those two.
Yeah.
Next question, I don't know how many times I've been asked this. Can each one be treated? And what does that mean? Well,
Yep.
can a phobia be treated?
Absolutely.
Can a fear be treated?
Absolutely.
What does that mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. So obviously a phobia is has been installed somewhere because we're only born with two real fears, aren't we? And they are?
They are the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Both a survival mechanism for a human being.
Yeah. So the rest have been imprinted, have been learnt behaviours throughout your life at some point. Some point have gone in. Sometimes you can remember, sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can they be treated? Yes, is the answer. We said absolutely. If they have gone in, and then they can come back out. Or we can overlay something, a bit like when you think about a record, that as soon as you get the stimuli, it jumps into the groove of a record and starts playing the same program over and over again, the same record. It jumps in that groove. So what we do is that we will go in and we will feel that groove in, and it will jump somewhere else.
Yeah. So, and how do we do that? Well, the fact is we don't actually go into anything. We're teaching. We're teaching people how they can run their own brain, how they can use their mind on purpose to get the results they want. Because it's all very well learning something or having someone do something for you. When you learn to do it yourself, you're safeguarding yourself for the rest of your life, that should anything else come up that's similar, well, you already know what to do. Whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, for the rest of your life, you'll have a new idea that you can then take forward. And I think that's a bloody good idea.
Yeah, as we always say, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis.
Absolutely. So a few specific questions that we've got here. Number one, I've got more than one fear. Can you deal with them both?
Can we deal with them both?
Well, I would answer that immediately to say, I can deal with them both, and you're going to learn how you can deal with them both. Now, whether you learn to deal with both of them at the same time or individually, really, whether it's one conversation or two, to me, I would rather people just get the right result. Sometimes when one thing changes, everything else must change, so the other one simply dissipates or changes in a way that's useful. If not, well, whatever worked the first time, do it again with the other content.
Some of them are great because you may have a fear that's quite difficult to test. For example, a fear of flying, because, well, if we were to do that here with, no, I don't think the airport.
Yeah, we haven't got a plane yet.
We haven't got a plane, not yet.
Not yet.
We're saving up, but we'll let you know when we get our first jet. But it's very difficult for us to test that one then. But fear of spiders, for example, so if you come to us with a fear of spiders and a fear of flying, we could work with the fear of spiders, and then we can go out into the garden and we can test that, can't we?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's quite a convincer. So we can work with the fear of spiders and the fear of flying, and you know that they've worked because you've had one of them really being convinced. So the other one will just follow the same pattern in your mind, won't it?
Well, yeah, and the fact is, if somebody's sitting in front of me in a cafe or in an office or wherever we might be, if they can make themselves afraid of flying there, well, it's not the aeroplane that's causing the fear.
How do they do
It's
that?
something going on in here. They're actually going to know when something's changed, because when they're provided with the stimulus that made them scared when they first arrived, before the end of the time we spend together, if they're provided with the same stimulus and they're not getting a fear response, well, it has changed. It is testable in their experience in that moment. Now, okay, that's not the same as getting onto an aeroplane, but look, all donations gratefully received. We've got £3 so far, but no private jet.
So are you saying that someone can be afraid or a fear or a phobia of something that's not actually there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, especially phobias, there's a very clear distinction that some people actually require the physical stimulus to have the response, whereas other people, their trigger mechanism may be a word that generates that thought process and kicks off the program that was running.
Just the word spider.
Yeah. Or
Trigger
snake,
the
or
phobic
height,
response.
or go outside, or whatever it is that they find fearful. The powerful learning in that is, if that person can be afraid of something that is not actually in the room, but they can freak themselves out or even have a phobic response, which I have seen, then they can, if they've learnt to do that so succinctly, they can learn not to have that reaction, to have a different reaction. Well, I become very interested in how's that going to change their life from that moment on. The first question I ask people, if they say, well, I have a fear or I have a phobia, is really, so what? I mean, okay, cool, you've got one. What impact does it actually have on your life or not? Because if there's no impact, then there's no desire to actually make a change. But if there is something, especially if it's regularly occurring in your environment, that's holding you back or disallowing you from living in a way that you choose to or would choose to, then making changes to that and having the ability to be free in those situations, well, that could be very useful.
Because, as we say, you may have a phobic response, and we would bring that down to a healthy fear. What do you mean by that? Well, if you've got a fear of spiders, for example, and you live in Australia, well, you might have a phobic response every time you see a spider, and that's not healthy. But having a healthy fear of spiders is probably going to keep you alive.
And again, it depends on the client, their environment, and what it is they're presenting. If someone has a phobia of clowns, there may be no situation in their life where it's going to benefit them to have a healthy respect and fear for clowns. So that might be appropriate to change it completely and have a completely opposite response. It depends on what people are doing and what they want.
They keep failing their interview at McDonald's. No, but it is true.
They might not even be able to go into McDonald's. Who knows?
Yeah, because there is quite a few of these phobias. We run an event called Thinking for a Change, and just to make people aware of, well, us humans really, us being human, we can be quite imaginative. That anything that we can invent, anything that there is in the world, there is a phobia for it. So we give out A4 sheets printed really small, and there's about 12 sides of different phobias currently. That's hundreds and hundreds of different phobias. Fears of dust, fears of clouds, fears of grass, you name it, fears of beards. They've all got beautiful Latin names, absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
But it is, there's fears out there of people have fears of birds, and they will, especially if you live in London, pigeons everywhere, and they're jumping into fast-moving traffic to try and get away from one of these phobias. So no matter how silly...
Fast-moving traffic in London?
yeah.
I've never been afraid of fast-moving traffic in London.
Yeah, rickshaws, fast-moving rickshaws in London, fast-moving cyclists. But they're jumping in the way of danger to get away from something that's quite, well,
potentially
outside of them, something quite silly.
Yeah. Where they could make a decision to take a step to the left instead of throwing themselves backwards.
And they might just drop that down so they dislike birds, and they will just walk around them. It's fine, they don't have to go over and pet the things, but they're not having that phobic, dangerous response.
So we've got a few specific questions this week, and the first of those is, I've got more than one fear, can you deal with them both?
Yes, is the answer.
Yes. There you go. Now, whether it's appropriate to deal with them both in the same sitting or as two separate scenarios, one straight after the other, 2 different days, whatever, again, that's coming back to, it depends on what they are and how that person's representing them and what effect it has on their life. Often, because when one thing changes, everything else must change. When one fear is changed as a response, and suddenly the stimulus comes up and they have a completely different response, when they think back to the other fear that was, well, maybe that doesn't have the same effect. And if that is, great. If not, what do? We deal with them individually.
What we find as well, and I always say the same thing, I love this, I love it when people come to me, because I love fears and phobias because they're so strong and people are so determined with that they can't be removed. They always use the word impossible. I love it. So when they come, they have 3 phases, almost 3 cycles that they go in. I like to watch for. And the first one is defiance. You know, I've had this fear for 20, 30 years. There's no way that it can be removed. And then the next one is confusion. When that fear is gone and they see themselves holding a spider or doing something that they wasn't able to do, that look of confusion is, how am I doing this? How has this happened? And then the third look is the beautiful one. That's the one of wonder, because they wonder how suddenly this has happened, but they also wonder, well, what else could they do? So sometimes what happens is they come to see us for one fear, and it was the one that was the most dominant in their life, but then they suddenly go, would this help me with, and then they have the others. The public speaking, would this help me with interview techniques? Would this help me with this as well, couldn't it? The answer is yeah, because you can wonder, because if you can make such a great, fantastic, drastic change in your mind in that quicker time, if you can learn how to do that, then what else is possible? That's why I love fears, because they're so powerful.
The very cool side effect from dealing with a lot of these fears and phobias with clients is when we follow up with our clients is finding out what else has changed in their life.
Yeah.
It comes back very much to, both of us have trained with Dr. Richard Bandler, and anyone that has probably heard him state, if not has heard him quoted, if you change the way you think, it changes the way you feel, and it changes what you're capable of. Because if something's been true in your world for 20 years, your whole life, whatever it might be, and then in what is by comparison a very short space of time, because the brain works faster than you think. With that new learning and that new understanding and that different response, the capability with that spider or snake, whatever it might be, has changed. The brain starts looking for generalizations of, well, if we change this thought and this is how we felt changed and this is what we're now capable of, with this new capability, how do we feel about other things we were thinking about? And the process can go both directions, and there can be a multiplicity of change, and that can be darn exciting. Well, I like it anyway. Question.
So to all those out there, if there's anything that's holding you back, possibly you could change it.
Yeah. What would happen if you did?
What would happen?
I've always had this fear of spiders. Is there anything I can do?
Poor little spiders.
Yeah.
Always poor little spiders.
Well, there's definitely something I can do. I'm pretty confident there's something you can do as well.
Yeah. All hypnosis is self-hypnosis, and we can just show you how.
So yeah, the very simple answer to that in my mind is yes, there is something you can do. And I'm very confident if you knew how already, you'd already be doing it. So if you're in a situation where you have a fear of something, if you've always had it, that's fine. Get in touch with ourselves or a competent NLP practitioner. I highly recommend a hypnotherapist who's trained and insured here in the UK. If you're looking for an NLP practitioner, find someone that's qualified through the Society of NLP and explain what's going on with you, and you may find that it will only change the rest of your life. Just a thought.
Starts with spiders.
Question number 3 is a double-barreled one.
Is it?
And I've heard it a few times, and you fielded this last week.
Did I? What's this one then?
Will it come back?
Oh.
And what happens if it does?
Okay. The answer is
Generally, no.
no.
But what would happen if it did?
well, we can repeat the process. Take it out.
It always makes me sort of have a giggle. If someone's had a fear for 20 years and they can go and visit someone for 1 hour and go 6 months without the fear and then manage to learn something stupid again and end up afraid of other things, wouldn't you just go back and do what you did 6 months ago? I mean, maybe it hasn't patterned as in a certain genre in a certain environment.
Or someone re-implanted it. That happens sometimes. It can.
Well, when you look at the model that you learnt to have a fear or phobia, then you learnt how to have a different reaction with that same stimulus. 6 months later, if it came back, it hasn't come back. You've learnt something new on top again. Well, the answer is learn more, learn differently, learn to generalise it through your entire life in any possible situation that can come up.
And as we're saying, that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So you've already learned how to do this. So you've got all of the skills, all of the resources. Just come back and we'll show you, just give you a little kick. And you can go and access those skills and resources that you did it last time, you did it, and you just do it again.
Look, there's a lot of things that in my younger years, my teens, that I learned, whether it be through school or parents or something along those lines, things that I hadn't done for 20 or 30 years, and then I wanted to do them again, like riding a bicycle, for example. I didn't ride a bicycle for 15 years. I hadn't forgotten how to do it, but I did need to get on and take my time at first and then carry on. The power of learning is that it stays in your mind, in your brain. You have access to it. If you get out of practice with something, what's the answer? Practice. Pretty simple, really.
Sounds pretty simple.
So there we go. In a nutshell.
And phobias.
Yeah.
Something that's very strong, something I love playing with. We're going to be running some events in the future with fears and phobias. We're going to have some snakes and spiders around that people can come and play with.
Yep. Toads and skinny pigs.
Yeah, so look out for that. That's going to be a fun day.
Yeah, a bit of humour. Well, thank you all for joining us on this week's cafe. We will put up what our next topic's going to be in the next few days, so you can get in touch with us and throw any questions our way that you'd like specifically answered. We're also going to be, our plan is for the next cafe is to start doing these cafes live.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So we've been asked by a good number of people now if we could be doing them live so they can be more interactive. That was our plan, and the plan is going to be kicking into life. So looking forward to seeing you on the next one.
Take care.
Cheers.
Wherever you're going, go there happy.